everybody, and welcome back to yet another episode of the Gameable Audio, your VGM podcast. And today we have a very special episode, as this is the first episode of the year, and this is also the 1-year anniversary of Gameable Audio as a rebranded podcast. But that's not why it's so special. Today we actually have the composer Patryk Scelina, who worked on the game Slavic Punk. Old timer, welcome to the podcast.
I'm Patryk, and thank you for having me.
It is an honor to have you, to be honest. I'm just super excited that you actually reached out and was like, yeah, this is super interesting, and I love the work that you've done on the game that we're going to talk and dive into today. But first of all, before we dive into today's topic of talking about Slavic Punk, I would like to hear a little bit more of where you come from, basically. What made you get into music to start with?
When it comes to game music, I wasn't really into it at first, to be honest. Of course, I loved some game tunes, like from Montezuma's Revenge, for instance, which I played on Atari when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. However, I never thought of doing it for a very long time. It wasn't really interesting to me because I didn't really like 8-bit sound, I always wanted to make something that sounds rich and real, and now not some blips and bloops. At least that's how I saw it at then. But I was always into music, like overall, and I always loved music, and I always felt that I would like to have some sort of job or somehow be involved in music production or music creation or writing process. I never really liked because I started some sort of music education, which I didn't finish actually, but I started when I was a kid, and I wasn't really liking the idea of playing someone else's music. I always wanted to make my own. So it was kind of stupid because this is how you learn. And of course, now I understand it. But when I was a kid, it was kind of odd to me that I have to learn someone else's music when I want to really make my own. But anyways, when I was starting trying to make some sort of music, the professional gear was very expensive, and the music software which could run on a regular PC was just around the corner. It wasn't really there yet, but it was showing up. And I think I get some sort of Cubase demo, which I couldn't even run on my computer because it required some specific audio interface, and it wouldn't. I couldn't make it work on my regular Sound Blaster, which I had in my PC. So anyway, I started by making some sort of techno music at first, because those tools that I got at the time, I thought that this is like the only kind of music that I can do with those tools. At least that's what I thought at the time, because it was like, very simple sequencing and using some very simple samples. However, in some time with my friend, we started using samples that we got from some old tape cassettes. And we started making music, which was sort of inspired by Fatboy Slim and Prodigy. This was the kind of music that we were listening to, because it was like 1997, 1998, that time. And at the same time, I was playing in a school pop rock band. So I also got into some sort of songwriting, and I thought that actually that was something that I really wanted to do for some time, and I thought that maybe in the future I will be some sort of songwriter and maybe some sort of artist, singing and stuff like that. Later on, I realized that I cannot really sing, so but I was living in a dream for some time, so I was hoping maybe that this is the thing. So I believe that somewhere in my 20s, when I realized how much I like film music, And and that was something that really came to me when a young aspiring director contacted me because he found one of my songs, which I did in high school, on MySpace. You remember MySpace?
Oh. Yes, I do remember MySpace.
Yeah,
so what was this more of the techno type part, or was this more of the from the band?
It was like pop rock slash pop slash rock song, which I wrote in high school, and I recorded myself, and I put it online. Like everybody at the time. So he found me on MySpace, and he wrote to me because he wanted to use this song in the end credits of his film. And I was like, sure, man, of course, take it. And I cannot remember if it was him who asked me to write the score for the film, or maybe I asked him if he needs one. Nevertheless, I made the music for the film, for his film. It was his first. It was his first film, and it was medium length. It was like 40 minutes, something less than an hour, I believe. The music was total crap. I don't even want to hear it right now, but I remember that it was total crap. However, I completely fell in love in making music for media. The storytelling aspect of it was something that I enjoyed the most. So this is what slowly brought me into games. However, at the time when I started making music and I found some gigs, I get some gigs for some mobile games, and believe it or not, for Flash games. Do you remember Flash web engine? Yes.
Yes, I did.
Yeah, so that was.
I've been playing them so much.
Oh, okay. So I started by making music for those little arcade games, and it was somewhere around 2006, 2007, something like that. But it was fine. But I was very storytelling hungry. And those kind of games didn't really tell any stories. They were just like simple arcade games, and
they were,
So it wasn't really something that I thought it's gonna be my career path. I didn't see this interesting enough, and especially because at that time I played Star Wars: The Knights of the Old Republic. And I think this was the first game that I played, which I felt was like a film. When it comes to storytelling and also music-wise. So so that was something that I wanted to do. When I played this, KOTOR, as we call it, I thought that, okay, man, this is something I would really love to do. But at that time, I wasn't really aware if there are any game studios in Poland, where I come from, which would make anything other than those arcade games. I suppose when the first Witcher came out, then I thought that, okay, something slowly is happening here in Poland. And it was, and it was. After Witcher's success, I saw more and more Polish game studios opening. And after a decade, it grew into a recognized game industry. And, this is where we are now. And I'm fortunate enough that I can work with some of those studios, and also really, really, really enjoy this. That I can also work with some studios outside of Poland. I also found some great opportunities outside, and I really enjoy it. It's right now it's my day job basically, and I'm really happy I can do it, especially because every single project is completely different, and this is something that is the most exciting, because I'm very quickly bored of what I'm doing.
Okay.
When I do something, a lot, I very quickly get bored. So games is really great because every single time it's something different.
That's awesome. No, but considering also that you were talking about these arcade games as well, were these more local, or since because of internet, was it easy for you to get in contact with people overseas? For example?
It was all local. Of course, there was internet, and it was getting faster. However, I think I didn't have the kind of like skills or imagination how I could actually find some sort of contact, some business contacts outside of Poland using internet at that time. Right now it's kind of obvious, but at that time I was actually looking locally.
Yep. Okay. Now, how was the scene when you got into this early? Were there a lot of people working with Flash and so on during this time? Was it easy for you to find like networking, etc.?
It was kind of accident because I was at university. I was studying something that was called digital media. And everybody in this group of mine was doing something, related to internet, to games, to maybe some multimedia stuff. At that time, the market wasn't really set like today. That we have everything quite obvious. Back then, everybody was looking for something new. And we didn't really know what's going to happen in the next 10 years. So we didn't really know if it's going to be more like films and making like interactive films. Maybe it's going to be a good idea, because at that time it was also kind of thing, making interactive films. These days it's not that flashy. But also those games, those small Flash games, it was I remember it was very popular at the time, because every company that had some budget, they wanted to have some sort of Flash game on their website, just to make an impression
and have people stay at their homepage and visit it over and over.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember even my own web page, which I did in a Flash as my first portfolio kind of website. It was also this kind of like animated with some music, with some sounds, and I wanted to make it as impressive as I could by myself.
Did you have any of these arcade titles that were released for example, for Newgrounds, for example?
What do you mean by Newgrounds?
Newgrounds, it was like this first like mega portal for games made in Java and
okay. No. I don't have any experience of that.
Yeah. Now, it's always interesting when we usually tend to talk about games that we found online, because most of these titles usually ended up at some point on Newgrounds, which also became like this huge portal and huge meeting place for a lot of people. Some of them are very open today surrounding this, but it's really fun to hear where you kind of come from and what you've gone through. Especially it was interesting to me that, hey, I actually was in a school studying for music, but I didn't like it, so I never finished it. and here you are working with music full time. So considering this, did you have any close relative or family member that taught you to play music in the beginning, or was this more of a huge interest on your own?
Oh, no, completely. I come from non-musical family at all. Of course, there is an appreciation for music in my family, obviously, like in many others. However, there are none, at least from what I know, there are none members of my family which ended up being like professional musicians or anyone related to the music.
Okay. So, and also going through everything as well, you said that you were very interested in having this more narrative element with the music style and so on. It's also very interesting that you then kind of trajected into having a video game perspective on this, because of course there might be narrative games, but as we all know, the most narrative you usually tend to get through movies, for example, due to the fact that, hey, the track that I'm writing is going to have this kind of feeling or aesthetic to it. while in a video game, we don't know what the player will do.
Yes, exactly. And also that's the fun part, because I really found that this narrative aspect of games is really exciting, because you can design, and this is something what I also like to do, and I consider myself an adaptive music designer, not only just composer, but also adaptive music designer, because this is like another job, really, in some cases. And I really find this exciting because you can because you cannot really predict what the player is going to do at this specific moment.
Exactly.
This gives you this opportunity of creating this system that's supposed to somehow make something with your music to fit those decisions of the player. Which is cool. Of course, sometimes it's I scratch my head a couple of times to figure out how to do something, because there are many obstacles during the process. But still, it's really exciting. Of course, working for a linear media is also exciting when you have a film. There are some limitations in games regarding music, of course, that you shouldn't probably do something that you would normally do in a film for a game, because you have to somehow prepare the music in a way so it can go into different directions in specific moments. So you cannot really do things like we know, especially from some older films, when music was really like into the smallest detail, it was synced to the picture.
No, I think that's the most interesting part about the medium, such as video games, due to the fact that we never know what the player will do. And even if you make a track that has a really nice crescendo, to have that crescendo be placed in the most specific way, or at the precise moment, whenever, like when you have these millions of players doing random shit all the time. But when everybody's looking at the video or the movie, they have it exactly the same time.
Of course, because you never know how long this crescendo can be, right? Because the player can do something in the middle of this crescendo, and you will never finish it. So you would have to cut it, and it wouldn't just sound good. Of course, there are some ways, to crossfade it to something else, but it's always tricky.
It is. So I think that is also something that may interest you a lot, since you, as you said, you don't like to work with the repetitive part, but you like the challenge, from what I understand.
Yeah, exactly. That's what drives, this entire career.
Have you tried anything with the more adaptive music, having it dynamic, for example, yet? Working with layers?
Oh, of course. This is what I do all the time. Like I always try to find an opportunity to, even if the game is quite simple and even if it's linear, I always strive to make something that it's as adaptive as it can in a specific project. Yeah, so I always try to design adaptive music system from the ground up for a specific project, like custom every single time. Interesting.
Now, I think I'm just super eager now to get into to talk a little bit more about your work for Slavic Punk now. So in order to get a little bit of a grasp, of course, we're going to play the first track of the week. But before that, we're going to talk a little bit quickly about the studio behind, and a little bit like a more general feed of what Slavic Punk is. So the studio behind is Red Square Games, which is a Polish developer, which is placed in Krakow, from what I understand. The studio started out in 2020, and Slavic Punk is actually their first video game. They have previously worked on a tabletop RPG called Cyberpunk, which was also interesting to me, since I love tabletop RPGs. Considering the game, Slavic Punk Old Timer, which is the full title of the game, released on PC on the 28th of June 2023. The game, it is an isometric cyberpunk game, and as stated by their trailer, as viewed by the Slavs. In this game, you will take the role of the private investigator Janus, and you will fight your way through the streets of a city which name has been long forgotten. And you will shoot with multiple variations of weaponry, You will dash and dodge incoming attacks. And let's not forget the the work of a well done active reloading. And this is, if you work well with this one, you will gain the advantage. Just having that said, I think I'm already sold on this game, because looking at this and looking at the trailer, I was like, I really do enjoy what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing. Sadly, for this interview, I haven't had the time to actually play the game to get a better glimpse of how the sound actually sounds exactly while playing the game. So I've listened to the soundtrack, and I've enjoyed a little bit of gameplay videos on it. But I usually tend to love and explore this world by myself. But just for reference, I have not played this game, as we're going to continue our talk surrounding Slavic Punk. So with that said, let's dive into the first track of the week, which is the main theme from the game Slavic Punk Old Timer. First track of the week. This was the main theme from Slavic Punk Old Timer. And the feeling I got while listening to this, just so I have this clarified again for people that have this as their first episode, my feeling that I have, that I'm going to talk about, is usually when I sit down with this track, I'm closing my eyes, I only have the audio to accompany me, basically. And I listen to this over and over again to see, okay, what is it that my body fills up with while listening to this? So, for the main theme, I've written the following. A really nice noir cyberpunk aesthetic. Yet, in some section, it gives me a neat 80s vibe. I definitely like this opening track! Exclamation mark.
Okay, sounds good. Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah. So when it comes to a main theme, I guess this is also the menu theme.
Yeah.
If I'm correct.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So working with a main theme, was this one of the first tracks you made in order to get more of a kind of understanding of the soundtrack, or how did the start go for this?
Well, it depends. If you're asking about specifically the track that you listen to, or just the theme, which goes like... because the theme, the melody, it's something that I came up with a little bit earlier when I started working on a game. Because even though this game is quite linear and it doesn't really have very deep storytelling, there is actually a story. It's a little bit hidden in the background, but there is a story because it's based on a novel. I'm not sure if this is clear enough from the description of the game, but this entire game is based on a novel series by Michał Gołkowski, which is a Polish author. And also the RPG game which you mentioned is Cyberpunk. It's actually the original name of this novel and of this entire world. However, the name was changed. I don't really want to go too much into it because I'm not sure if I can talk about it. But the name was changed. Of this game to Slavic Punk, somewhere in the middle of the process, and I wanted to find some sort of a thematic material for this entire game so that I can move on through the story with music, because this is something what as I said in the introduction, I always try to find some sort of storytelling everywhere. So I was trying also to come up with some sort of themes and motifs for specific moments and characters of this game, just to move it along, musically with the story. So the theme I created almost at the beginning of the production, but the track that we just listened to was one of the last ones. I think it was maybe even the last one that I created for the game.
Was there any specific from the developers that made you select this one for the last thing?
No. I just when it comes to things like this, which of course on the soundtrack is called the main theme, but I really I think it's more like a short suite because it has this main theme which goes like. But it also has something that I call investigation motif, which is more like... And so this is a combination of those two melodies, which I use along in a game. And in certain situations, like this investigation motif, for instance, I use a few times in a gameplay as a stinger, just to point out, just to accent something that we are discovering something, for instance, which is related to the main story or which is related to this investigation, because we are the Janusz, the main character of the game, is actually going into investigation, and when he discovers something, some sort of piece of a puzzle which he's supposed to find, then you can hear this investigation motif. So going back to because I can talk about this for like 5 hours, so you have to stop me at some point. I'm sorry. But going back to the main theme, it was the last thing which I wrote, mostly because I was consciously I was forcing myself not to write anything for the menu up to the last moment. Of course, if developer would say, okay, you have to do something for the menu because there is silence, and you just have to put something there, then maybe I would do. And but fortunately enough, they just used some placeholder from the game. They just used some different track in the menu for entire production process, so no one was complaining. And then in the last week, probably, or maybe last 2 weeks, I could just replace this placeholder into this final track.
Okay.
Yeah.
So considering how you got into it, because I think that's going to be an interesting part as well. How did you get into this project, first of all?
How do I get?
Did you contact the studio, or did they hear about you and contacted you? It's like, hey.
I think I cannot remember right now because people which work in the studio are also related to some other studio which I worked in the past. So it was probably some sort of word of mouth, and just probably just. I think I was just, how do I say it? Sorry.
No worries. I'm guessing it's more of like, hey, word by mouth, you have it in your network, and due to that, it's like, hey, you should come and work on this game.
No, just someone just recommend me, probably.
Okay, that's nice. So considering when they got in contact with you for the first time, did they have anything to show from the game or something to you, or was it like, hey, we're working on this, and it was just more text-based information that you got in the beginning to see if you were interested?
Specifically in this project, it was really very text-based information up to certain level. Of course, there was some sort of vertical slice, which everybody does at some point.
Yes.
However, I have to say that what we did in vertical slice and what I did music-wise, and also the adaptive music system that I created, the prototype that I created for the vertical slice, it's something completely different than what we have in the final game, because it was, it was evolving. It was evolving to that point that I found that I have to completely redesign my music system and also put some sort of an anchor in a different place, if I can say that.
Mm-hmm. How did you feel yourself about redesigning and working on the music? Did you feel like it was a good thing to do? Did you feel that you also yourself kind of evolved with this?
Well, I was actually happy that I was involved for quite a long time, because every single, of course, at some point you feel a little bit exhausted when you are into a project for quite a long time, like 2 years or something. However, even though I'm tired, I feel really I really enjoy the part of growing into the project, or maybe I should rather say maturing, because the project matures somehow in my head during that time, and I come up with completely different and I hope better ideas at the end of the process, because I had so much time to grow into it. Because sometimes, and it also happens, and I'm not saying that it's bad, but sometimes when there is a project, like when I got into it for last 2 months or something, I don't really have I don't really have time to think. I just have to go up to the finish line and just release it, and that's done. And so I don't even have to. I don't even have time to second guess myself. I just do what I think, what my intuition give me, and that's it. But I really appreciate the time when I have, even if it's a little bit too long sometimes, but I really appreciate it, because this main theme, which I wrote at the end, I think it could be completely different thing if I would have to do it like half of a year before.
Yeah, I think so. It makes sense.
Yeah.
So I understand what you're saying here. Because one of the interesting things considering game development is usually that when it comes to a tutorial, you usually tend to make the tutorial last. And the reason for that is you don't know which mechanics you're gonna have in the end,
of course,
if you make the tutorial first of everything.
The same thing goes with
is that the same
introduction
with
to the
music?
book, right? When you write the first intro to the book, you write it at the end of the process, because then you know what's in the book.
Where they will end up.
Yeah.
But is it the same for music, you think? Or is music more fluent?
I think it depends. It depends on the specific project. Because if it's story-based, like I like to work, it's really best to get the whole picture. Because if you make some sort of random tracks which is supposed to work in a combat, you don't really have to think about story. You just try to make something that sounds cool, and and it's just fun to listen to and fun to play with it. But when it comes to the story, you really have to understand it, and I think that you really have to know what's going on, and you also have to feel it. I think that I wouldn't make the same in music if I couldn't play or at least see the entire gameplay, with all of the cutscenes, with all of those cinematics. Because this really changes your perception. Like, even the pacing is completely different. When you watch or when you play some game prototype, you don't really feel this entire gameplay yet. Of course, you have some sort of understanding what's gonna do, how you're gonna fight, what kind of weapons you have. But you are a little bit outside of the context. It's a little bit like watching a single or maybe single scene from a film without having anything else, you know. Of course, you can have some sort of feelings about the scene, but without the context, without the pacing of entire cut, you don't really know what's, how you're supposed to make music for it. And with games, it's a little bit different because we have levels and there is some sort of like straight line, you're cutting some in some places because you have those levels, you have some cutscenes. But even though I feel that the experience is much better when I make music which really takes in count entire arc of the storytelling and the gameplay, and this is also why I think it's better, because especially when you look at the beginning of the game, this is probably not the next track, but maybe we will listen to it today. One of the first combat tracks that I did for this game, I intentionally make it slower, so that you don't have this kind of excitement and everything is bombastic at some point in the game, especially when you go further into the boss combat, which is at the end. You want it to be the most exciting part. So intentionally, I made the first combat very slow and lazy.
Okay.
So you can build.
Is it like you're isolating the experiences as well, then?
Yeah, a little bit, of course. At least I try.
Interesting. We can all try, right? No, that is super interesting. But I think it is time for us to listen to the next track, because it has some similarities to the first track as well. That's why I think it's going to be very interesting to listen to this track as well. So the second track of this week's episode of Gameable Audio is going to be Welcome to My City. Welcome to My City. I can really hear the same melodic style as we heard in the main theme on this one. But this time, it is a bit clearer on some of these instruments, especially the string instrument. But we do have another saxophone melody, which I believe we did not be the same from the main theme. And this time the track gives off more of a, and I used the rabbit ears here, smoky style. What I'm thinking here is mission briefing with a commander that smokes at least 3 cigars. Maybe not at the same time, but at some point he's done those cigars. Overall, this track is more on the low end, I really enjoy it. So what do you think about that? Was it spot on?
You are very right, because this is actually the music from first cinematics in the game, which introduces the main character, and there is also a briefing, and there is also a cigar. So you are very very close to the reality. Of course, it's very similar to the main theme, because the main theme is actually Janusz' theme, which is our main character in the game. So I also repeat it every single time in the cinematics when something related to Janusz is going on, when it's important. But there is also a Sonia's theme, which is played on the saxophone, which is she is a kind of like a boss of Janusz, but he also we don't really know that, but I think that he is in love with her, or maybe they had some relationship in the past. We don't really know that. So it's a little bit like, like sexy noir kind of motif for Sonia.
Mm-hmm. Now, I really like the saxophone part, but I really like how the contrast is between these two instruments as well. So, like you're saying, you have actually two different themes included in this track. One thing that I also would like to point out here, both Welcome to My City and the main theme were tracks you selected. And I would like to hear a little bit more on your end. How come you selected these two very similar tracks?
Probably this is something that goes with my tendency of looking for storytelling and trying to portray how we see those characters and how they evolve, and also I think that I chose these tracks because it was a little bit easier for me to explain how I use different themes and motifs and how they change a little bit, because you heard the same melody, but it was a little bit different tempo, a little bit different instruments. So every single time when I use those, I try to change the perception, or maybe the emotional aspect of it a little bit, so it fits the specific moment, but we still hear the same melody. This is actually something like this is actually something that comes from films. This is very old trick from films, when there is a leitmotif which evolves during the story of the film, and it changes. It can be played very softly on a single instrument, or it can be very heroic, played by entire orchestra. It doesn't really matter. The only thing that matters if it fits the specific moment, but the melody stays the same very often, or maybe it changes a little bit harmonically, maybe, but the core of it stays the same.
Definitely. Considering the instruments as well, are these more from musical libraries and so on that you utilize and you worked with, or do you have actually real recordings that you either played by yourself or any other artist that you took in to record?
It's a combination of both, actually. I worked with a saxophonist, so the saxophone part is all played live by my friend Kacper Mikołajuk. And electric guitars I recorded myself. Some of the acoustic guitars also I recorded myself, and all of the synthesizers, of course, I made myself, like with with hardware synthesizers and also with some software synthesizers. But there are some samples as well. There is a instrument, like string instrument, which sounds a little bit like balalaika. Playing this kind of tremolo on a string, and this is something that I couldn't really make it sound right on a regular guitar. I also have a mandolin, but the mandolin doesn't really sound that good, so I ended up using some sample library for that, unfortunately.
Is this the string instrument we can hear in the beginning of this track?
Yeah, exactly. Yes, exactly.
I don't know why it's about like, because it for me, when I'm listening to that type of sound, I can't ignore the fact that I'm thinking about Russia every time.
Well, you're quite right.
Is balalaika a Russian instrument?
Yeah.
Because I have no idea.
Yeah, I believe so.
Is it intentional to just utilize that, or is there any thought behind it?
Well, it's kind of tricky. It is connected to the entire story part, which was wrote by Michał Gołkowski, because as you mentioned, there is also a board game called Slavic Punk. So as we know, we cannot really avoid that Sibir is in Russia, right? So this is Eastern Europe, or not even Europe anymore. So everything here is somehow related to the East, basically. And so that's why I use those sounds, just to put the action or the feeling a little bit to the east. We didn't want to go too far because we wanted to make it as universal as we can, but still, because it's called Slavic Punk, we are kind of telling, okay, we are somewhere on the east, right? So we have to somehow relate to that. So that's why I used those sounds, just to make this kind of like geographic reference.
Mm-hmm. Was that more of a discussion you had with yourself, or did you have a discussion together with the developers on this kind of take to like, do we go full on the heritage, or do we want to keep it more like real cyberpunk, for example, like we have the more common cyberpunk music today?
I cannot really remember how it was. I remember my own thoughts that I don't really want to make something that it's like the copy and paste of cyberpunk type of games, and I wanted to make it just a little bit different. Of course, I wanted to make some sort of reference to Blade Runner. That's also that's why I also used saxophone, because this is like totally Blade Runner to me, which I love. So I wanted to make it a little bit like 80s kind of music, little bit referenced or inspired by Blade Runner, but I also wanted to use some sort of modern sounds and combine it just a little bit with something that would give you this kind of Eastern Slavic feeling. Yeah.
Did you have any references for like more modern take of sci-fi then?
No, I don't think so. I also played some games before I started working on this, because believe it or not, but Slavic Punk was I think it was the first game score that I did, which was almost 100% electronic, because I always try to, of course. When we talk about it, there is a saxophone, there is a guitar, so it's not completely electronic, but still it's very heavily electronic. It's like almost everything is based is synthesizer based, with some little elements of acoustic instruments. So I was trying to play some other cyberpunk type of games, just to have some sort of clue what other composers did and what other games look like and sound like. However, I didn't actually find anything that could be like one-to-one reference for us, which was actually good, because that it gave me much more freedom, and also something that I wasn't afraid that when I make this kind of music, it would be compared to something specifically, because it's not directly inspired by something. It's a little bit of it's a mixture of different spices.
It feels like we've seen investigation and sci-fi to some extent. If we just think about the Shadowrunner series, for example, but having that type of style, but also Slavic, makes it unique. So considering the game I'm hearing and considering the music I'm hearing, it actually comes out as a unique selling point to me. I can't really, like you said, I can't really make any other references. The closest I can make feels like it is Shadowrunner, to be honest.
Okay, that's good. That's not a bad reference.
And it's a great game with great music as well. So no, but I really like the synergy that comes into it, because listening to the full soundtrack, it gives off a kind of a red thread throughout the whole, but at the same time you really have these hilltops and really like deep oceans as well, because you have variety within the soundtrack. How did it feel to work a little bit more surrounding the varieties as well? Because, well, theoretically we have just one style and one experience he's having, but still you're able to get this variety in it.
This is something that I really enjoy in writing for media, like overall. It doesn't really matter if it's a game or film or something in between, because I don't really have to look for ideas outside of the project. Like, the project is inspiring by itself. When I was writing songs when I was in high school, I was always trying to find an idea. Okay, what can I write about, right? So like every songwriter, you are looking for some inspiration in your own life, but it's always tricky to come up with an idea. And with stories like that, there is no problem, because you just have to open the manual and you see it. So for me, it's just like that. I can just see what's happening story-wise on specific moment. Because even when you play some level of Slavic Punk, even if you don't listen to the voiceovers or you don't really read those text informations that you have on the screen, and you are just enjoying it, there is some story behind it. So even if you are trying to forget about it, I can at least make music which somehow relates to that and can somehow follow this entire narration, or basically just can grab your hand and move you along a little bit. So just by music you can feel a little bit what's going on. There is a level specific. I don't remember which one. I think it's maybe 7th. Doesn't really matter. But there is a level in which we are chased by some bad guys. However, you don't really see them. You are just getting through this level just like every other. But story-wise, you supposed to know that someone is really chasing you. So and you are getting out of the fire. So I tried to make music which would somehow portray this situation, even if it's not visible. You just have to feel that it's somewhere out there.
And what is the best way to have that, in your opinion? Is it like a specific instrument that usually tend to give that, or is it the full spectrum that tends to give that?
That's kind of tricky. That's kind of tricky because that's it's kind of tricky because we go into the territory of how do you describe musically fire, anger, water, or anything else, right? So it's really abstract. But hopefully sometimes it works. Like you have some sort of feelings. You don't really know what's going on, but you have some sort of feelings which can provoke your perception to the to the place where you somehow subconsciously you know what's going on.
Exactly. Now, with that said, I think it's time for us to get into the third track of the week. So, with that said, I think it's time to play, let's see, Here Comes the Heavy. Here Comes Heavy. Now, this is something interesting that is happening here. The track does give off some, I would say, almost an industrial style between being repetitive but also strong. Yet this track stays curious with its patterns and gives off a, like, I see this as a strategic battle vibe. Like, there's isolating some enemy that you're supposed to fight somehow. How does that feel for you on that?
You're very close, actually. Especially if you didn't play the game, you were really, really close. So it means that you have really good intuition, I believe. I'm really happy that you see this way.
I would say it all comes through the music. Think of this. I'm sitting here in my chair just listening to the music, closing my eyes, and this is what I'm seeing.
Great. Really, really great. Yeah, it's actually the first combat track which I was mentioning before. It is kind of lazy a little bit, but you can still hopefully feel that something is going on and that you have to somehow use your strength and and just fight with someone. Yeah, but I didn't want to go too much with the combat feeling, especially it's called Here Comes Heavy because there is a enemy that you approach when you hear this track, which was called Heavy. it was just the work, the raw name of the character. I can't remember if there is another official name, but we called this character Heavy. So basically, it was just like a soldier, like a soldier in some sort of skeleton with some like a mech type of enemy.
Okay.
So he was moving a little bit slowly because he was heavy. So that's also why music is a little bit slower. It was I think it was good circumstances because I didn't want to make this music too fast, and also the circumstances of this level and of this combat was that the enemy was kind of slow. So I didn't have to go against the pace of the combat. It was kind of fitting.
It is really interesting that you're also designing surrounding the thought of how an enemy acts instead of how the battle itself should play out or how the level should feel. That is also, I think that is pretty unique. I haven't really heard about that from any of my other interviews that I've done with composers. So that's really interesting.
Oh, that's.
But it's also fun to hear that, since I said it's almost an industrial style, and it's so much fun to hear that it's an exoskeleton.
Yeah. So I think you got it.
Pinpointing, that's my thing, apparently. Now that we're going into a little bit more of enemy vibes here as well, since this is a little bit more of a slow one, is this also some sort of... Because from what I've seen on gameplay, it doesn't seem like we're going around sneaking about that much, but the possibilities seems to be there a bit at least. Is it a little bit of a sneaky stealth level as well surrounding this, with where this track is played?
Well, especially I think in the beginning, those first like 2, maybe 3 levels, you can sneak a little bit. However, it's not specifically a stealth type of game. You cannot really get through it without combat. Yeah. So you can of course hide a little bit, but you cannot get through it without fighting.
Okay. Surrounding the style here that we're looking at, I don't know if this is the correct style to say that this is an industrial style, but this one feels like it sticks out. For people that don't know, this was also the track that I picked, and usually when I usually pick tracks after the composer has picked, and the reason for that is because I picked the weird tracks, the tracks that the composer doesn't pick. It's like, hey, this is unique, let's talk about this.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
But there's also another weird track which I'm surprised that you didn't pick, but maybe because there's not enough room for that.
Yeah, I have to limit at some point,
course,
or else we can
course.
just listen to everything, and we're sitting here for 5 hours instead.
Of course. Understandable.
But with this being more of an industrial style, when we're thinking about the aesthetics that we have for this game, this is a Slavic cyberpunk type of game. where do we draw the lines for genres here? Because we already had the more noir with the saxophones and the balalaika and so on. And now we have this more industrial.
Yeah, because this is specifically combat. I try to reserve all of those themes and motifs to all of the storytelling parts. So all of those cinematics and also those parts when we hear the characters saying something, or as I referred before, when you discover some puzzle, some piece of a puzzle of the entire investigation that you are getting through. When you discover something, then you may hear the investigation motif, for instance. But in a combat, there was really no point in making any kind of reference to the to the story, because you are just purely have to fight. So I was rather trying to, in this kind of situation, I was just trying to somehow portray the other side, like those enemies that you are approaching and the environment that you are into. You referred yourself that it feels a little bit industrial, and it is, because we are actually in some sort of industrial environment. That's why the track is also a little bit industrial.
So it is intentional on so many levels then, surrounding enemies, environment, and so on. It really comes together now to hear like your thought process surrounding why you have a specific track as it is as well.
Yeah, sure, of course. Well, I always try to, I don't know if every composer works this way, because it's probably very subjective, but I always try to find some sort of an anchor which I can hold on to. So when I'm in this kind of story-based moment in the game, I always go back to a little bit more organic maybe side of things, like using some acoustic instruments, and also going back to my themes and motifs, which I have somewhere in the pocket, prepared just to use them. And but when we are strictly in this action, there is no really point in trying to bring back the motif, with some exceptions, which we will get back in a second probably. But remember that this is the beginning of the game. So this is one of the first combats in the game. So I don't want to sell too much at this point.
Yeah.
So I'm just focusing on the environment more than on the story.
Yes. And does this ever change as well surrounding the development of this soundtrack as well? I mean, considering you said before that there are boss fights as well, do bosses have more of a motif to them rather than a fighting theme, for example?
I really would like to tell you that. because we will get to the track that you picked, which is a boss fight. But
we'll wait with that question for later, though.
But you would have to put some sort of spoiler alert, because this is something that's you shouldn't really know if you shouldn't really know before going into the end of the game. Because there is some sort of surprise story-wise. So it's a little bit like saying to someone who never saw the film with Bruce Willis that everybody is dead. No, sorry, not everybody is dead, but he is dead in the film. It was Sixth Sense, I think, right? Sixth Sense. Yeah, so it's a little bit like, Bruce Willis is dead, and he's a ghost. So I don't really want to do that.
Yeah, I understand. Then we're not going to spoil it for people that might be interested in this game after listening to this episode as well. But we'll try to talk a little bit more generic around it then when we get to that track as well then. So we can promote the track as much as possible, at least. No, but I really, so far with the first 3 tracks that we'll listen to, I really feel like we have this red thread all over it, and I feel still like even with this industrial part, it feels very cyberpunkish. So that's where so far so good. And of course, I'm not going to spoil anything until we listen to the next track. And I think it's a great time to start listening to the next track, don't you think?
Okay, I agree.
Awesome. So the next track we're going to listen to is called Solving the Investigation. solving the investigation. Very down low in the beginning of this song, but halfway through it really picks up. If I'm not mistaken, you are utilizing the same melody in some of the later parts of this track, in some similar tracks previously in this game. Am I correct? Is it similar or not? Anyway, this track is a banger. What do you say?
Sorry, I think I interrupted you a little bit, and I didn't.
No worries.
And I didn't know if you finished or not. All right, so you're totally right, because you, as you know, I made this kind of investigation motif, and this is something that I also used here. And in this track, it's actually a main part, because very often I was using this motif, which is like, right? And this is something that I use very often as a single, like, stinger or jingle, however you want to call it. And and in this place, because this is almost the end of the game, you basically are really solving the investigation. So I wanted to make this theme as a main element. So that's why this entire track is based on that. And it's also a combat track, so it had to be a little bit more energetic, and I also wanted the player to feel that we are getting into the end. So you have this kind of like pumping energy, which hopefully gives you this impression that you are getting closer to the resolve.
This is interesting as well to me, because this track is 3 minutes and 40 seconds long, and it has these two parts. You have the first part, which is more down low, and you have the second part that really racks it up. Considering, as you're also saying, that this is a combat track, is this where the adaptiveness come in?
Yes.
Do you have the full track where you have it just down low in the beginning and then it ranks up? Or is it more looped, like in the beginning of the part you loop the first part and then at the end of the battle when it kind of reaches its apex?
Basically, this is there are two combats in which I use this track for, and the first part is something that you basically go into some new area and you start fighting with some enemies, but the first part, it's not so intense, so that's why the first part of the music is a little bit lower. And there is a little bit of break in the middle of the combat, because once you get through all of the enemies, you have to hack the computer. So I didn't want to stop the music, because as I mentioned before, I wanted to give this kind of impression that you are getting really close to the end. So I wanted the music to be all running all the time and give you this impression that you are still in the action. However, when you stop this hacking process, then more enemies come into the area, and you have to fight again. So that's why this is the moment when the second part kicks in. There is some sort of riser which goes like woo, and it's some sort of an introduction to the second part of the combat.
So considering this track, I'm guessing this full track is not included into the game itself, but you have split it into two of them?
In game, it's of course it's split into not even two, probably the four parts, which are triggered based on some specific logic.
Yep.
In the soundtrack that we can hear on Spotify and on other platforms, some of the tracks are edited a little bit, because especially those ambient tracks. So I made this kind of editing to make it a little bit more pleasant to hear, like as a regular song or piece of music, rather than something that you hear in a game. Because sometimes in a game this music is much longer, it's loopable, but sometimes I also use some sort of randomness in the music, which you cannot really hear on the album. Everything is fixed, right? But in the game you have some elements which are random.
Exactly.
So it's not that boring.
I feel usually when we're listening to the soundtrack, you always have like the ultimate situation you will hear it in, while you have all the other sounds like shooting, grenades, and so on firing off in the middle of a track and so on. If you were supposed to listen to a track like you're fighting it, I think it's going to be too chaotic. Trying to listen to a soundtrack, you're having a firefight in the middle of it.
Yeah.
But it's interesting as well because you had with Here Comes the Heavy, you have this more down low as well with the industrial style being repetitive and strong. Yet this one has in the beginning the really low pace, I would say serene track style, and then in the end you have this more pompous and really nice style that I personally love and adore usually when I'm fighting. But at the same time, I really like the spectrum that you have. And the reason for that is one of the greatest examples of pacing in music and games, for me, is Diablo.
Oh.
You have this Diablo game where you're running around and you're slaughtering enemies and they're flying, their bodies are flying left and right all the time. And then you just stop and listen to the music. And it's so slow. And the reason for that is having contrast with this. Is this something you usually tend to think about as well when you're composing music for a different situation, etc.?
Yes, exactly. This is exactly the situation. I wanted to have this kind of contrast. So that you really feel that something extraordinary is going to happen in a moment.
So it's almost like you're composing a track for a horror movie then.
Yeah, a little bit. Maybe
something extra extraordinary will happen.
yeah. Some jump scares.
You will get scared. Exactly. And instead of a jump scare, it's a boss popping out.
Yeah, a little bit. No, but in this case, I think it's just what you describe is really accurate. This contrast.
The more I'm thinking about music and composition and so on, I'm starting to get a more understanding surrounding this with all my expertise of interviewing composers. Because, of course, everybody, like you said previously, a lot of composers think in different ways of how they work with the processes, etc., but also how they apply their knowledge to music and musical knowledge in overall. And everybody comes from unique places. It's why we're able to have this many different genres, etc., within the world of music. And also we can hear this width of music within video games as well. And I think listening to only 5 tracks today for this game proves my point as well on this. But in the end, you have 21 tracks on the full album, which also describes a little bit more on the width. I didn't pick like the super crazy tracks either, so there's still more to the width on this soundtrack that is available. So I really like that. I really do.
Great, thank you.
I don't have any further questions surrounding this track, because I'm interested to kick it into the last track of this week, if you're interested, unless you have something else you want to talk about surrounding solving the investigation.
I think we covered. I think we covered everything. Honestly, yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, then let's head into, I guess it's the last boss battle then.
Exactly.
Of the week. So there's the track name from Slavic Punk Old Timer on this last track of the week is named Gonna Kick Your Ass. gonna kick your ass. This was the last track of the week from Slavic Punk Old Timer, and my feeling for this, it is a little bit short, but I would say it's still very effective. This track really stood out of the OST. While other tracks had this deep richness most of the time, this track really gave the psytrance style. As I said, like I'm actually really surprised when I was listening to the full soundtrack. This track really stood out of every track there is, and the most of it was because of the other style it had. All of a sudden, it feels like I am on a disco. I don't know.
That's interesting. That's interesting. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. It is kind of different because we are... I wanted to make a surprise music-wise close enough to the surprise that we have story-wise, basically. So yeah, I don't want to spoil it as we mentioned before, but we are actually getting into the final fight, and we have resolved everything, and we are. Sorry, I just blocked myself somehow, like every single time when I'm trying to find a fancy English word. So never mind. Every single time in this game, when we get into the combat, everything is more or less set. We basically know more or less what to expect. But then when we go to the final one, we have some sort of surprise. And I just wanted to portray that with the music as well. And it goes a little bit like techno, maybe. It has this kind of trance techno style. It's not only because I wanted to make it different, but it also, at least to my taste, it fits more to the environment that we are into. Because at the end of the game, we are getting from this more like very dirty and industrial type of environment, we are getting into this more slick and futuristic and very sci-fi looking environment, basically. So I just wanted somehow to refer to that with music as well.
Okay. That's really interesting. But at the same time, like you're saying, the trance techno kind of style, would you say your old self when you started out making techno trance music?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah,
you would be proud of yourself.
Yeah, probably. It was probably somewhere in the last pocket of my mind, somewhere, in the last drawer of my mind. I probably it was unintentional, but maybe I just somehow felt that this is kind of like going back to the childhood a little bit. I don't know.
Considering all the different kind of tracks that you did, we listened to 5 tracks today, and of course some of these had a little bit more width than others, of course. Which style for this soundtrack did you have the hardest time providing for? Would you say?
It's kind of tricky, because at the beginning when I started to work, I had this period of searching or fishing for ideas, and I didn't have almost any problems with those more story-driven tracks, because this is something that I felt more in home with, like, because it's more cinematic, it's more like movie style a little bit, because it's driven by the story. Most of those tracks are basically in cinematics, so they are like film music a little bit. But with those combat tracks, it was kind of tricky to me, because as I mentioned before, I was trying to do something that was somehow related to cyberpunk style, but not also, I also didn't want it to make it like one-to-one, rip-off from some other specific game or film. So I just tried to find something that's gonna be somewhere in between, like a hybrid of modern and 80s kind of sound. So that was my goal. So this was probably the biggest challenge overall. But once I got that, and once I also found some sort of a workflow for myself, like using specific synths, using specific effects, I also created some sort of sample library for myself, which I used in this project. So once I built that over a few months of working, it was getting easier and easier because I had material which I can come back to. So I could reuse something. I think I created like 100 or 200 loops with different like glitches and the drum beats and something like that. So I created those samples, those loops, because sometimes it's easier for me to get into this kind of experimentation and sound design process without thinking too much about the final music of the game. So I'm just trying to find interesting things, like interesting sounds, even creating presets for synthesizers, which then I would use. Because once I'm writing music, I don't really want to waste time, or I don't want to get outside of the flow of working, and and just grabbing for 2 hours knobs of the synthesizer and trying to find the perfect patch, So I always try to create this kind of like library which is specifically made for the project that I can use over and over again when I'm working on some tracks. Of course, I can change them, and maybe I will in the row. Maybe I will create something different as well, something new. But at least I have something that I can start with. So that's basically how it worked. I just spent some time, like, I don't know, like maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks, just working on different sounds, experimenting with synthesizers, recording some loops, some samples, some ambience, some drum beats. And then when I was working on a specific track, I could just go to the library and think, okay, so in this track, I think I need something more industrial. So let's see what I got. And then I could just pick something and maybe tweak it a little bit, but at least I had something to pick from.
Okay, that's nice. It's always nice that you have this kind of backpack as well in library, where you have all these extra tools that you can utilize in case you get into some sort of a writer's block, I would say. That you can return to and get more inspiration by inspiring yourself instead of looking back into other references and so on. It's like, hey, now I need to listen to Blade Runner again, for example.
No, that wasn't a good idea to look for those references outside of the project, because there is always some sort of risk, or rather you can very easily go to this kind of danger zone that you unintentionally you're gonna just rip off something by accident because you hear something and you like it. And this is something that happened to me quite a few times actually in the past, that I created some sort of theme, some sort of melody, which I thought, oh man, this is great, I'm gonna use it, and then after like 2 weeks when I was using it in a game, I realized that this is some theme that John Williams actually wrote for some film that I saw 20 years ago, and I forgot about it, or whoever it could be, right, like Alan Silvestri maybe, or James Horner, or someone else from those classics, which I love.
Yeah, but I guess it's a really hard thing making compositions as well. I mean, we've been making music for a really long time in the world, and there's so many different people out there that keeps making music. Of course. Isn't it hard to think about, like, hey, I am original, but it feels like we're all just sampling and doing music that already exists? Or do we really need to get super weird about music in order to stay original?
It's I think it's a state of mind that we have to somehow figure out for ourselves, because once you start thinking that you probably won't come up with anything original, because even if you don't know it, you probably just by accident create something that already exists. This will put you in this like impossible situation, or rather it will block you. At least I think so. It will just block you even more, that you will because you will think, okay, there is no point in doing anything because I won't probably create anything new. So I rather try to focus on those things which I try to not think about ripping off something by accident. I mean, like, Because of course there is a chance that I will create something without knowing that it's similar to something else. But at least I have no hard feelings because I didn't know about it. Otherwise I wouldn't do it. If I knew, I wouldn't do it intentionally. So to the moment when I know that I have no I have no knowledge of anything that's similar to what I did, it's I'm like, my soul is clear.
Yeah, of course. Now, that was the main reason why I wanted to ask this question as well, to actually provide a little bit more insight from a composer's perspective as well, in the thought process of making music in a world where everybody's making music, basically.
Yeah. And now AI is making
so
music.
It is a crazy world. We're all out of jobs soon. Except you can do it unknowingly.
Of course.
No, but I have one last question, which is usually a question I tend to ask composers from time to time. Considering all the different track names that we have for the album here for Slavic Punk, I know you didn't give these names in the beginning. How is your process for making track names when you're working on them? Do you have funny names, or is it structured in any way?
This is impossible task. Every single time, it's just it's a nightmare, really. It's getting a little bit easier when there is a specific story behind it, because when I don't remember honestly all of the names of those tracks on Slavic Punk album, to be honest. However, when I'm looking on those, I can say that many of those are just related to the specific point in the game. Like "Welcome to my city" is basically just the line of the Janus character at the beginning of the game, for instance. And "Solving the Investigation" is the name which is basically name of the track, which you hear when you go into this moment when you about to solve the investigation. So I always try to find those kind of references. It's not only I think it's not only good from this title standpoint that you have something that is related to the story. It's not some random name, but it's just also easier for me to come up with those names. Because without it, I just wouldn't know how I would call this track. Like great beat and I don't know. I really have no idea how I could come up with those names without an anchor in the story.
Yeah, and if you're so interested in the story as well, it's not going to be level 1, level 2,
exactly,
level 3 track.
Exactly.
Yay.
The only one which I really had hard time in Slavic Punk specifically with coming up with a name is the final track that we listened to, "Gonna Kick Your Ass," because I really had an idea. To me, it was the perfect name for the track. But I knew that I cannot use it because I will spoil it.
Yeah, I see.
So I just created this. So I just picked this almost like a random name for the track because I didn't want to use the line which we hear in a cinematic, or I didn't want to use any reference to the specific situation because it would be just a spoiler, and we don't like that.
Maybe you don't want to have. Yeah, and you don't want to utilize last boss battle either, because then you have a story on everything else, and you just last boss battle.
Of course. And this is something that happens from time to time when you look on some film soundtracks, and I know from a fact that there are some web services, like some portals which write those reviews of soundtracks, that these guys they are really getting those soundtracks and they are trying to solve the puzzle by just of the film. I mean, they are trying to somehow figure out what the film is about by those names of those soundtracks, by the name of those titles of the tracks. And this is something that happens from time to time. I don't remember which film was that, but I believe that it was one of those new Star Treks, which was created by J.J. Abrams, and the music was by Michael Giacchino. I believe there was one of the tracks on the album that was like total spoiler.
No.
I cannot remember right now if this was like 1, 2, or 3. The film first, second, or third. But I think it was the Star Trek. There was some sort of a spoiler in the title.
Oh yeah, that is fun though. That is fun when that accident kind of happens,
exactly.
when you want something and it kind of don't pan out like you want.
Soundtrack used to come out after the premiere, and these days it's the opposite.
Yeah.
You get the soundtrack sometimes the month before. So so it's kind of tricky and risky.
It is, especially if you utilize spoiler alert kind of names. But of course, if you don't really know the movie that much, then the track doesn't really say much. But if you are aware of characters and so on, and then you have tracks with the names, then of course it's going to be spoiling. So yeah, I think it's a hard balance. And of course, if you're releasing something that may spoil something for people for some reason, then maybe they should stay away from it, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But of course, not always that easy.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
But yeah, now that we're talking of Star Wars and so on, I would deem that we're kind of done with Slavic Punk now. So let's kind of buckle everything up there, and let's actually talk a little bit about your future now. What is it? What's up with you now? Now that we're done with Slavic Punk here.
Yeah. Well, there are a couple of new games that I'm working on. Unfortunately I cannot really say anything because all of this is unannounced at the moment. So cannot really say anything. But I also work on some original music this year. At least, sorry, this was a lie. I'm about to work. I have a plan. But if I'm gonna do it, I will tell you next year. But that's the plan. I have a plan to make some original work this year, and I also work on my sample libraries because I also run some tiny sample library company called Sonic Atoms, and I also make those sample-based instruments. So this is something that I'm focusing right now mostly because last 2 years it was so heavy work-wise that I couldn't really do anything other than games, because I think at some point I had like 7 games which were just like in the same time. They were just overlapping. Those productions were just overlapping in the same time. So yeah, it was really tricky to get a hand around this.
Yeah, but how do you usually tend to work with that type of stress, having so many projects working overhead? You don't.
I just drink a lot.
You just came out alive on the other end for some reason.
No. Seriously, it's always tricky, but I try to keep my schedule tight, and I just try to, especially when I have so many projects which are going somehow in the same time. I just try to split my day into, or maybe not day, but weeks. I just try to somehow put all of those tasks in a row based on different days and weeks, so that I don't have to think about everything every day. So this week, let's say this week it's Slavic Punk, and if there's anything else, I just move it along, or rather I just move it back and wait. And once I'm done with those tasks which I had for Slavic Punk, then I can move to the next one. Of course, there are sometimes some sort of red alerts that you have to do something on the fly. Especially before some sort of conferences and some sort of game events you have to do, because there is a trailer going on, right? It's going to be released, so you have to do something very quickly. It happens from time to time. Yeah, but when it comes to the regular, game music work, I tend to put it into queue, and I just try to move it through it when time goes by. It never works.
But it's a good thought. It's a good thought to have.
but the good. It's good to have a plan. It doesn't matter that it doesn't work, but it's good. It's good to have it.
It sounds good. Sounds good. But yeah, if we know a little bit more about your future here, original work, more games coming in as well, hopefully we will be able to cover it somehow if like, hey, this track finally released and so on. Is there any way for people to get in contact with you if they really would like a word with you, for example? Is there any way they can contact you on social media?
Oh yes, of course. Like every adult, I'm on Facebook. Not to say old man. On Facebook, I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I'm on YouTube. I'm on SoundCloud. I also have a homepage, but probably no one goes there. You can also find the music on Spotify, iTunes, and Tidal, and everybody, and every other platform like Bandcamp, for instance. Yeah, but when it comes to the contact, I think Facebook and LinkedIn, of course, it's the way to go.
Yeah, that sounds good. And of course, for everybody, these links will be available in the main post, so you don't really need to specifically think about it right now. Just visit the main post and you will see all the different links there. So that's also nice. And specifically one thing as well, Patryk has also provided us here with 10 different diff codes in total for OST that he has worked on. So he gifted us 5 unique codes for Slavic Punk Old Timer and 5 unique codes for the game My Memory of Us. And these are codes for Bandcamp. And these will also be given out to our Patreon backers firsthand. And if we have any codes extra on top of that after giving it to the backers, then we will also do a little raffle publicly for everybody to join in for one of these tracks. So thank you so much for giving these codes.
No problem. Really, my pleasure.
Yeah. So yeah, do you have anything else you would like to share with us on any topic, really? Like, don't forget to tie your shoelaces.
Yeah, and be good.
Be good.
No, it's your first episode this year, so I would really like to give all the wishes, the best to everybody. I hope this year is gonna be much better than the previous one. I hope we're gonna be all healthy and happy, and everybody's gonna have a lot of fun this year with those games, with the music, and enjoy themselves basically as well, because this is something that we sometimes forget to enjoy ourselves.
Yeah,
we focus that much on on our tasks and the work that we sometimes forget to enjoy the life. So don't do it. Don't forget about it.
Wise words, I would say. Wise words. Now, yeah, with that said, it is time to close down the episode. So other episodes of the Gameable audio, you can find those on our homepage at videospelsklubben.se. You can also find it on Spotify or in your closest podcast app. Feel free to follow and comment on one of our social medias, either on Facebook or on Instagram. You search for Gameable audio and you'll find us there. Just give a follow or give a comment. It helps a lot. You can also support this podcast for future content and quality upgrades, but in the end, we will also support future composers, so think about becoming a Patreon. Our current awesome backers that we have today is Daniel Onemark, Lars Schenström, Titti Schenström, Kevin Wikström, Mike Björkholm, and Sandris Wikström. And all the links where you can either buy or support Patryk now, who worked behind the music for Slavic Punk, and also the developers, of course, for Slavic Punk. If you are interested in this game, you will find those in the main post of our homepage at videospelsklubben.se. The next episode that we're gonna have will be on the theme of shoot-em-ups. So Patryk, what's your deal when it comes to shoot-em-ups? Do you have any specific games you played when you were young or something?
No, I just don't.
You don't. Music! Would you like to make music for a shoot 'em up game in the future? I think?
Maybe. Who knows? Well, I don't really have any specific dreams about it, honestly. But I always wanted to make something like RPG, like really open world, something really intense story-wise. I really wanted to do it, but shoot 'em up, I never thought about it. Maybe I will. I have to think about it.
You worked a little bit with arcade, and maybe it's a shoot 'em up that does have a story. So maybe you can make the best. I mean, we know you can make cyberpunk games, so sci-fi music is your A-okay?
We'll see.
Or are you done with it? I don't know. Anyway, the podcast theme music for this episode was composed by the amazing Thor Myrdal as usual. And with that said, I want to thank everybody for listening in. I'm your host, Kristoffer Schenström. And with that said, I wish everybody a great week and have a great time. And see you all guys next time. Goodbye.
Thank you very much. Goodbye, everybody.